Hey, have you ever been on ShaderToy and looked at all the beautiful shaders and wondered, how the heck do I get this into Unity? Well, it's not that hard to do, and I'll show you exactly how, so stick around. The main difference between ShaderToy and Unity, other than the fact that Unity is a full 3D game engine and ShaderToy is just a toy to play with shaders, is that ShaderToy uses the GLSL shading language and Unity uses the HLSL shading language. More specifically the CG version of HLSL. And those two languages are very similar because they were built for the same purpose, so changing from one to the other really isn't that hard. I changed a few shaders myself and I came up with this handy cheat sheet that has the differences that I found between the two languages and that you have to implement in order to get your shaders to work in Unity. So let's use this cheat sheet and go through porting a few different shaders. Okay, first shader. This is a Russian nesting doll shader that I made a while ago. It's probably the most complex shader that I've ever done. It certainly has the most lines of shader code. It's more complex than most of the stuff that you will see on ShaderToy, so I figure if we can convert this, then all the other stuff should be relatively straightforward. So let me click inside of the code window here, Control A, select everything, Control C to copy it. And now let's go to Unity. So here I have Unity open with a simple quad in it. Otherwise it's an empty scene. And that quad has the ShaderToy shader material on it that I just created that doesn't have a shader yet. So we're going to create a shader for that. So I'm going to go right click, create shader, and let's make an unlit shader for this. And I'll call it Matroshka, and let's double click on it to have it open over here. And then over here I'm going to assign that shader to the material over here. So for that I'm going to go over here, and then over here I'm going to go unlit Matroshka. Alright, so that'll just give me a white screen. So now the first thing I'm going to do is, well, the first thing to notice is that inside of Unity there is a whole bunch of extra stuff that you need for that shader to run, because in Unity you have stuff like you can expose different parameters to the rest of your scripts, and also you have to deal with a vertex shader, and there's a few other minor things that in ShaderToy you don't have. So in ShaderToy, like the only thing that you really see is the pixel shader or the fragment shader. So what we have to do here is because we have to keep a whole bunch of this boilerplate code. And so what I'm going to do here is I am going to go right before where the actual pixel shader starts, which is right before this frag statement over here. And here I'm going to paste my entire shader code from ShaderToy. So now I have a very, very long shader over here, and now I can save that and I could try to compile that, and it will give me a bunch of errors. If I go into console over here, that will not work because it gives me unrecognized identifier vec3. And if we look at the ShaderToy to Unity cheat sheet, we'll see under syntax that anything that starts with vec needs to be replaced with something that starts with float. So let's do that. So I'm gonna go Control F to change to replace stuff. And now, like, you might think, I'll just type in vec here and float over here and replace all vecs with floats, but that's kind of dangerous because anywhere you've used vec in variable names or anywhere else, it will replace that as well. So it's much safer to do it one by one. So I'm going to replace all vec2s with float2s. So replace that. Okay, that's 113 occurrences replaced. Now I'm going to do the same thing with vec3s for float3s. And the same thing for vec4s with float4s. And I'm going to go through the whole list of the where it says syntax on the cheat sheet. So let's see here. So I'm going to replace all fract with frac. Okay, replace. And then I'm going to replace all mixes with lerps. So mix in HLSL or GLSL is lerp in HLSL. And And then I'm going to, let's see which ones I'm going to do first. I'm going to do the A10. So A10 is used for polar coordinates. And I'm going to replace that with A10-2. And if you notice on the cheat sheets, it says like under ShaderToy, it says A10XY, and under Unity, it says A10-2YX. That's not a typo. Like if you want the angle to be the same, they should actually be, like the parameter should actually be turned around. But in this case, it doesn't really matter much, so I'm just going to replace it like this. So there we go. And what else do we have? Replace texture with text 2D. See, like here now I type texture and now it gets something over here. So, but I only want to change function call. So what I can do is I can put the opening bracket on there, and then put the opening bracket on here as well. Although in this case it doesn't use a texture IC, so we don't have to worry about that. So now we replaced a bunch of stuff in the syntax. So let's save it and let's see what error it gives me now. So now it gives me incorrect number of arguments for numeric type. So over here. So that is, if we look on the cheat sheet, that is under typecasting. So in GLSL, it is more forgiving in some ways and less forgiving in other ways in how you define certain types. So in GLSL, you can make a vector3 by just typing vec3 and in brackets just one number, and then it will paste that for all the numbers. In HLSL, you can't do that, but in HLSL, what you can do is you can just have a number on the one side of the equals, and then it will automatically fill that in. So we have to go through that for all of the occurrences, and there might be a few. So let's just speed through this. So over here, P is a float, but I want to float 3. Well, in HLSL, I can just do this. I can just multiply it by a float, and it will automatically go to the target data type that is needed. So I save that, I try it again, and then I have it somewhere else. I save that, or I take that out, and I keep doing that until I don't have those issues anymore. And then I have unrecognized identifier mat3. Well, on the cheat sheet it says anything with mat needs to be replaced with float. So let's go over here and say mat. And I'm going to do the specific one. So mat3, and replace it with float 3 times 3. Okay. And let's see what else we got. Undeclared Identifier Mod. Okay, so mod it gives you the modulo, like whenever in shaders when you want a repeating pattern, like in the case of the nesting dolls, we have a whole bunch of nesting dolls marching down the street. Well, I used mod for that. In HLSL, there's a function called fmod, which on the surface looks like it does the same, but it doesn't. So don't use fmod because it's gonna all screw up. So what I'm gonna do for this, instead of typing, what it says in the cheat sheet, x minus y times floor, blah, 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 I'm going to make it defined for that. So I'm going to go, let's go where the other defines are, say over here, and I'm just going to define a new function. So I'm going to say define mod x comma y, and then I'm going to type that in brackets. So x minus y times floor of x divided by y. So now I just defined that as an extra function, so it shouldn't complain about that. So let me save it. And now it complains about iTime, which is the variable that changes with the time inside of ShaderToy. Inside of Unity, you have something similar. If you look on the cheat sheet on the right, it says iTime is the Unity equivalent is underscore time.y. So underscore time is a vector 4, and the y component is the component that increases by 1 for each second. The other ones go faster and slower. So time.y. So let's replace that. All right. What else do we have? So we have more of these guys. I'll just speed through them. Okay, and now we're getting to matrix multiplication. So left right is the matrix that will allow the marching doll to move left and right when it's marching. And in GLSL you can just multiply a matrix by a vector in 3D space to get it to be transformed. Inside of GLSL you can't do that, or sorry, inside of HLSL you can't do that. You have to do it like this. So I have to say mul, and now I hope that I get the order right, but we'll see. Right, so you have to use mul instead of an asterisk for multiplication of matrices. And actually, it didn't complain about it, but over here I have a matrix, and over here, like I built this matrix by multiplying two matrices together. This you can also not do, it turns out. So here you also need a mul. So I'm gonna put, even though it didn't complain about it. So I'm gonna put that, and then a bracket on the other side. All right, what else does it have? There's another one over here. It's the same issue. So I'm just gonna. All right, and then we have more of these. All right, and now it's complaining about this thing called eye resolution over here. And we use that inside of ShaderToy to calculate the UV coordinate. So what I'm going to do is, so this is the main function of ShaderToy, and right underneath it we should have the main function for Unity. So let's take this main function for Unity and cut it and put it right above the main function for ShaderToy. And now I can cut off the beginning here because we're going to still use this function here, and we're going to replace basically this function by this function. So I'm going to take this out here, and then we're going to take the beginning out here. And now it was complaining over here about eye resolution. Well, we don't really have that inside of Unity, or not natively inside of a shader anyways. Also, we don't need it because we get a better UV coordinate. We don't have to calculate our UV coordinate as much inside of Unity because the UV coordinate already comes in from 0 to 1. So instead of this here, I can just take that out and say I.UV, and that should be the same thing. And then over here what I did is, this is the compensation, the aspect ratio compensation, and we're just going to take that out because we're on a 3D object right now, and like the aspect ratio doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. So I'm just going to take that out. Then we have something for the mouse. So inside of ShaderToy, you have this eye mouse here that gives you the mouse position. In Unity, you don't natively have that. You would have to add it yourself. Check out some of my other videos to figure out how to add that. I'm sure you can figure it out yourself. So for now, I'm just gonna set this to 0 over here. Let's see. So let's save this. Let's check it. It has more issues. So over here, this is a matrix, so it needs to be multiplied in a different way. So I'm gonna do that, mul, and then this guy, and then that guy, and then don't forget the closing bracket. All right, and then it says undeclared identifier frag color. If we look on the cheat sheet, then we'll see that in GLSL, in HLSL, that works a little bit different. We're just going to return that color. So instead of frag color equals, we're going to say return this. All right, so let's try save that, and let's see. So now it's churning. Let's see what's going to happen. Okay, so at least it compiled now. It doesn't show as much, but it compiled, so that is already great. It took me a while to figure out why this was the case, why it compiled, but it still didn't look, or like it still looked like it was screwed up. And that is because inside of Unity, if you, inside of the shader here, if you make a global variable that is already initialized in the beginning, so well, here there's some constants and here there's some variables that are already initialized, they will not hold their value unless you put static in front of them. So I put static in front of all of these, and let's see what happens there. So I'm just going to copy paste this. Yeah, I don't think I need all of them, only the ones that are initialized, really. So save that. The moment of truth, and look at that. There we have our shader. So we can go over here and click animated material, and you see there is your ShaderToy shader in Unity. How cool is that? Cool, let's try another one. All right, the next one is this shader of some underwater world. And let's go over here, Control A, select everything, and then let's go over here and make another shader, another unlit shader. I'll call it JellyFish. And then we do the same thing again. So first of all, let's make the shader for the material, the JellyFish shader. So I'm gonna go over here, unlit, and go to JellyFish. I'm back to white. And now let's look at the JellyFish shader. So I'm gonna go right above the fragment shader and then paste in everything. And then I'm gonna start changing my stuff around. So vec2. And again, for the A10, if you want the exact same result, then you need to also swap the parameters around. But for most cases in my shaders, it usually doesn't really make a huge difference. So I'm going to save this. I'm going to check the console what my error is. Okay, Undeclared Identifier Mod. I'm just going to copy that from the other one. So I'm just going to take my define over here, copy it into the JellyFish shader over there. Save it, check it, and then we have all these errors again. So there we go. Okay, now we have iTime. So iTime was time.y. So iTime, replace it with underscore time.y. Okay, save it, check it. More of these issues. Okay, now we're back at the eye resolution error. So like now I'm going to take my fragment shader from Unity, cut it, and paste it right above my fragment shader for ShaderToy. And I'm going to take the first part off and all of this as well, cut it out. And now over here, that's just my i.uv, so i.uv. And then my resolution, this is my aspect ratio fix. I'm just gonna take that out. For the mouse, you can figure it out yourself. And let's see, okay, so I see a matte 3 here, so I'll just replace that with float. Not flat, float, 3 times 3. And then over here, I also need to change it over here. And then I'm probably gonna, yeah, so here I need to make a mul. So I'm gonna take that out and I'm gonna put the mul over here. And what was this? rot x, comma. All right, save this. Let's see what it does. Okay, more errors like that. Take it out. And then we're at the frag color. So I'm just gonna return this whole thing. And then it's gonna compile, and then I have a black screen. So let's figure out where that is. Probably because of variables that are initialized over here. So I'm gonna do static, put static in front of it. And these I don't need because they're not initialized to anything, so. And look at that. How easy was that? So that is how you change your shader so it works from ShaderToy like in Unity. So it's really not that hard to do. So yeah, have fun with this. Be sure that you don't just steal people's work and don't credit them for it. Just always check what the license says, and just be a nice person. I hope you liked this video. If you would like to see more videos like this, then please like, subscribe, comment, click that little bell icon so that if I make a new video, you will be the first to see it. And either way, I will see you next time.